So today, I just want to say I'm really grateful to be here with Mustafa, and we're going to try to continue our discussions. And the word this morning that really came up and resonated with me was witness. And I've felt, I think, maybe for the last 10 years that my role is to be the witness of me being the witness with the Sudanese community here on the Monterey Peninsula. And by being the witness, what I mean is that my awareness of the Sudanese is not something that I would be able to interject into because I don't know the language, but I certainly understand the sincerity and the purity of the Sudanese people. So what we're really hoping to do is maybe start a dialogue today about what New Islam is. And I'm hoping that Mustafa can answer that for us, because a lot of people just think that Muslim or New Islam is all the same thing. And I'm hoping that we can show that we're really all the same.
At first, I would like to say how grateful I am for meeting Marty, because she represented the bridge for me with the spiritual American. We started this, we met the first time 10 years ago, and she, by now she knew the Sudanese community and all the people with whom I have close friendship. And even whenever some people come to visit me, I bring them to her here, or she comes to us. And when I first started coming to the center, it was because of her. I just felt that I owe her something. I owe her lots of good things. But then later on, I came to like coming to the center. It was very useful for me. Generally, I also feel indebted to the whole American nation, to tell you the truth, because this is a country that received me. I'm coming from a poor place, from the heart of Africa, and I don't have much to offer. But then this country has received me and has offered me a decent job. I'm now an associate professor, and they offered me a home. Now I have a house of my own, and I'm a full citizen. And I think this can rarely be found anywhere else in the world. And I hope the U.S. will play this role all along, because this qualifies America and the American people to actually lead the world. For being so generous to the others and to the strangers and to the people with trouble. My country being governed by the extremist Muslim groups, and this may be a good start to differentiate between the extremist Muslims and the Islam which is thoughtful, which we call the second message of Islam, that's introduced by Ustaz Mahmoud Muhammad Taha back in 1945. After lots of worshipping, he has been imprisoned by the British government. He has been a fighter against colonization, and he has been imprisoned. The first year was not completed. He was released after 50 days only, but then he was imprisoned for 2 years. And after finishing the 2 years, he went and closed himself up in his home to continue what he started. And he was in this khalwa, which is closing yourself in a place and worshipping, intensive worshipping, trying to find about himself, as the way he put it, rather than knowledge. He's not seeking knowledge. He wants to know what he is and what is his purpose in life. And in the end of the 3 years, he came up with his first book. He brought a contemporary Islam that is adaptive to modern life. And unlike others who has produced and written books about how to bring Islam to an adaptive version of Islam, they brought it from philosophy and from their understanding of modern life. For him, he was able to bring that out from its authentic sources, from Quran and Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, which are the basic sources of Islam. His doctrine, which says that the Quran has verses that came first, what we call Meccan Quran, and there is the Madani Quran. The Meccan Quran, which is brought first, which is brought when the Muslims were few and helpless, it was built upon peace, upon respecting the beliefs of others, freedom. It's built upon equality, economic equality, that what we call socialism, and equality in decision making, what we call democracy with the language of today, and equality between men and men, all men of different religions, of different walks, and between men and women. All of that is already said in Quran. And I can read for the record here verses. As a matter of fact, I have a paper that I wrote in English, and I tried to publish it, and I was not successful in that. The same paper, when I wrote it in Arabic, it was published all over the place. A journal in Iraq, another journal in Morocco, the Sudanese in paper called Al Watan, and all over the internet. The paper is there, and there were it throws up this very good discussions about the Madani and the Makki ayat. While the same paper, when I tried it in English, I was not able to publish it, and I sent it to different places. And I thought, I have friends in universities, some professors, and I asked them for advice. Maybe it is the language, maybe it is, and I made it very concise so that it could be published. But then a friend of mine in an American university, a professor, told me that probably the people are not interested in it because they think it doesn't concern them. This is something concerns the Muslims. But I believe that it concerns everybody. We are no longer living in a world that things in any part would influence the things in other parts. As we can see today, Muslims, what we call terrorism is the influence created by Islam, and it is by the traditional early version of Islam. As I told you, there is the Makki Quran, and there is the Madani Quran, in which there is jihad, and in which there is enforcement of beliefs towards others, and in which there is the accumulation of capital is allowed, where it is capitalism, as a matter of fact, rather than socialism in the Makki ayat, and where the democracy is not there because it is the Khalifa who leads and they decide, a sort of dictatorship. But in the early time, in the 7th century, that could work, and in fact it worked well. Also, there is no equality between a Muslim and others, non-Muslims. A Muslim is superior over the non-Muslims, which something that could have worked or have already worked in the 7th century well, but it's not. No way it could be applied today and works. For example, in Sudan, there are the Muslims and there are the non-Muslims in Southern Sudan and elsewhere, but you cannot consider someone in his own home country. You cannot consider anyone a second citizen by any means, at any standard. So Islam in its early version, the version of the 7th century, is irrelevant for the life today. And the other Muslims who insist on applying the same version of Islam of the 7th century, they are harming the idea of Islam and the religion of Islam, in fact, because they are trying something impossible and ridiculous. What is happening in Sudan today, what is happening in Saudi Arabia, in the Taliban, is ridiculous. It makes everybody disrespect Islam as Islam, although that's not Islam. If it is understood in the context of the Makki ayat and the Madani ayat, the Makki ayat has the ideals for humanity. In fact, it has the solutions for humanity today. It is intermarrying socialism and democracy in one system. Right now, democracy is the best thing in the West, while socialism is the best thing in the East. Socialism failed because of its dictatorship. And the democracy here is not proper because of capitalism. Because in capitalism, it's the companies, it is the rich individuals who will manage. But intermarriage between the two systems will be the future, will be our future for governance. And I can see it now, democracy and social democracy, in the way I see it by books. I do not recall authors right now at this moment, but the idea is widely growing of putting together or social democracy or socialism within democracy. This is the thing going up, and it's coming for the future.
Okay, so I want to, you can interject this. I want to ask you a question besides the government and the political aspects of this. But and there was a point when I heard a CD, I think it was by the professor, your professor friend. And on the CD it said that, the second coming, that the Sudanese believed in the new Islam, they believed in Buddha and in Jesus too, which was the same as my Center for Spiritual Awakening. Can you reflect on that?
Right. The idea of new Islam is actually, it is bringing the layer beyond religions. It's not religion as religion we know it, but it is the scientific form of religion, which is the actual need of an individual, the goodness in any individual, whoever that individual is, the goodness in the mind and in the heart of each individual. It's a natural need that will unify us in the future, that will bring us all together. It's believing that all religions has already come from God, and even the unheavenly religion that has grown from the earth, they were grown by the need. We grew from the earth, but we are linked from above. We are physical components, organic components. We are animals, but we are having the angel mind or thoughts or ideals that were brought up by more intelligent individuals, but then they were linked with the heavenly bodies for Gabriel and other angels, and they came and revealed by prophets, different prophets, and it is the same idea all over. The difference comes from being adaptive to different environments and different cultures, and at different times. But it is the same ideas of talking to the hearts and the minds of the people and bringing up the goodness in them and letting them continue perfection towards God. And this brings me to what I have here today in the center, saying the I am, meaning the centrality, the source. We are all one and the same thing. We are one. But that cannot be perceived right from the beginning, and cannot be enforced, and cannot be pretended. in order for us to feel this oneness is to bring the awareness and to bring the that's why they say love is the fastest thing to bring this awareness, because by love you are pulled toward the center very quickly, because the love is the connection between the different items. The love is the cement that brings things together, links them to one source. And peace also, peace means the stillness, means there is no the differences and
Look up.
the problems.
I need to do
And coming back to your question, Ustaz Mahmoud said he had a belief in anyone, in any and each one on earth. He had a belief on him, because in him there is the seed for the mighty God. Because each one of us is going into towards perfection, and as we said last time, whenever you come to an end, then it's a new start, and this will continue after life. So if this can answer your question, but in short, the Makki ayat is the one that is proposed by Ustaz Mahmoud to humanity, which will solve the problems of humanity today, the originals, the principles of Quran. But then when people are not able to apply them, and when the 7th century cruelty interrupted, and they started the war, and they pushed him out of Mecca, when he traveled to Medina, they brought the second version of Islam, which is Medina, in which every Muslim is believing in right now. And that is why it could have been working up to the last century, up to before the Second World War, let us say, before the universe or the world felt that it is one entity. But it's no longer applicable after that. That is why the problems appeared recently. Let me read for you a quotation from Ustaz Mahmoud. He said, "The small world in which humanity lives is a single geographical entity. Fast modern transportation and communication media have connected its distant parts in such a way that time and space have shrunk. Whoever traces the evolution of life will clearly see that the global unity is the final destiny when its time comes. It is just a matter of time. The League of Nations, following World War II, was a practical step in that direction. The United Nations is as such another step. Still, however, between us and the global unity is a number of many stretched steps." This was written in 1954. So it was even before the internet and before the vast development in it's before global. Now after globalization and the internet and the cheaper and faster transportation systems, now this point became very clearly, and the expression "a small village" became very often, and we can see that time is shrinking and space is shrinking. What brought terrorism and the negative aspects of Islam is also, again, when the world came together to live together, that must bring the parts that are problematic. Ustaz Mahmoud refers to what he calls the rule of time. That is why, since an early time, Taha warned against the Islamic terrorism as an expected global hazard. He said, "Fantasism that is rapidly spreading over the Islamic world has to be confronted with strong convictions that uncover the fallacies and immunize people against its mix-up." The universe or the world is now in the crossroads. We have developed a technology that threatens our existence, represented in the nuclear weapons. And at the same time, the same technology has created the internet and the fast communication systems that unified the universe. So we have now the choice, and both could happen. The nuclear war could start at any time. If people are not careful enough, it can start at any time. And if it happens, there is no life as the way we know it. Mm-hmm. And the other choice is to go towards peace, cooperation, and to solve our problems. Imagine what kind of a world. There is no need even for migration from a poor world to a rich world, because every place will be well and rich. I mean, look at the Sudanese. Before 1990, they do not go outside Sudan. Me personally, after I finished my PhD back in 1988, and I went back home, I used to tell everybody that I will not go outside Sudan again. But then again, because of the instability, the Muslim Brothers, the Brotherhood, by the late 1990s, I wanted to go outside Sudan to any place. And no one can say I will just close myself in my country and I don't care about the others. Because through globalization, we are eating from the resources of other places. From colonization, the richer countries enter into the poorer countries across the world, and they used their economies, and by their economies they developed the present strong economies. And also after globalization, no country can depend upon its local resources. The local resources are already globalized. The peanuts that the Sudanese, say for example in rural Sudan, they cultivate in their villages, is sent up globally to be sold in the international market, and it will end up as a peanut butter to be for sandwiches of school kids in Australia or in Europe or elsewhere. So the globalization did not let a chance for people to live separately, each on his place. So again, our current world is calling upon us to go towards oneness. And also by a quick evolution, if you looked at the history of humanity, you can see that it came from the Stone Age, in which one family could not stay together, because any disaster, any fierce animal could just disperse them all over the place. And then gradually people are able to establish communities, tribes, villages, and then that went into towns. And when the agriculture came, the towns went into the kingdoms, and the kingdoms into empires. And until came in Europe in the 14th and the 15th century, when they started discovering other lands. And then there came colonization, and then for the first time, although colonization we say is difficult for the poor countries, but at the same time it served to bring the world together. And by the end of colonization, we came up with those countries with the present boundaries as we know it. And those countries, for the first time, are having similar government, similar education, similar economies. And then they were either the Eastern Bloc or the Western Bloc, or there were some people who were neutral at some point. And then neutrality was not possible. So lately, what we call the Cold War, it's either the Eastern Bloc or the Western Bloc. And then recently, the Eastern Bloc surrendered, and there are still difficulties and hardships and wars, and the Cold War is still there. The shadow of the Cold War is there. As a matter of fact, it is getting stronger recently. But when you read the history in that way, you can clearly see that we are going towards oneness. Mm-hmm. And the United Nations, although it is unfair. Some people are controlling over others, but again, for a future government that would lead us on to fair basis. And this technology, it's true, it is done by the West, through the hands of the West, but it is more a discovery thing rather than an invention thing, because the secrets are already in the material. I mean, in physics, it is so clear that those abilities, the capacities of the material to be of use like this, like for example, this camera, if it is not the capacity is possible already in the material, this could not have happened. And it is these events, this evolution that I just shortly put down, that is already pulled down by God towards one goal. And that one goal is coming. And that goal is a unity of the whole nations into prosperity and happiness that has not happened before. We used to say by the beginning of this century, the dream of humanity used to be more technology, to go deep in the ocean, high on the space, to discover things, to discover new materials. But that has happened. That's already done. Now, the hope for humanity is peace, is cooperation. And because it's the dream of humanity, it will also happen. And it is coming. And it is not just a chaos. It's not just happening chaosly. It's within a very profound and well-made, well-structured divine plan that is coming on a step by a step. And now what we call in the different religions, what we call as the return of Christ by the Christian, or the return of Christ in the perception of the Jews, or the return of Christ for Muslims, or the Mahdi Muntazar, or the Imam by the Shia, or the Ghaus by the Sufis, or whatever you name it in the different religions, in the Confucianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, you name it, any sort of religion has a sort of a salvation that they are waiting for. And it is coming and it's imminent, and that is my belief, and that's what the new Islam is saying. They are saying the new Islam is this layer, bringing up this layer. That would happen, and that will bring the ideal governance of people, where democracy is in its full capacity. Everyone has a full decision, unlike not like right now the poor and the rich are not on equal basis on giving their on making the policies. But it will come sometime where everybody is making the decision, and where also the ownership of resources by everybody through what we call the cooperative unions, similar to that in Scandinavian countries, the cooperative societies, where the ownership is for everybody through shares, and the returns is for everybody through shares. And then that will be crowned by social justice. When there is no war, when there is no reason to make a war, then that will bring peace. But the religions as we know them, there is no way that they will bring peace, because the religions are built upon everybody thinks he's right and the others are wrong. And that's why they are a cause for war, more war rather than peace.
Okay. So while you were speaking, what came up to me is I wanted to go beyond, the politics and beyond religion, and just into the spirituality thing. And for me, I know, 9/11 was the big one that really shook everyone in the States, and really a lot of people went into fear of religions. And but as I saw 9/11, the Twin Towers were like symbolized the end of duality. and that, you know, the outcome of all of this is that we're going to realize that we're all one. And so, looking at it, you know, metaphysically or whatever, it's very symbolic that when the towers came down, it's the end of one. And I believe that we're really going to have to go beyond religions, because obviously there are fanatic Christians, there are fanatic Muslims, there are fanatic any Mormon, whatever religion you have, there are fanatics. But what we're witnessing right now, I call it the great unraveling. It's like God's coming down with this eraser and he's erasing this, and like this does not work. And we are going to have to weave together a new way that we all work in unison, because I see a world without borders, and I see people going into singularity, going into oneness, and that's something that is way beyond religion, but it is not beyond spirituality. It's in enlightenment and in awareness that we will all realize that we are all aspects of God. We may not be the totality of it, but we're all, he speaks through us, and we are his instruments to self-realization, and that we are beyond our own story. So an important part is that we all do bear witness to what's happening right now, and it's being apparent that every day it's more important to stay in awareness, because what you see is not necessarily what's really going on. There is a big picture going on. And I think it really struck a very strong chord with me today when you said everything is in divine order, and everything is in divine order. And in the end, I believe war will be obsolete. It just doesn't work.
Exactly.
So I really look forward to our next conversation, because I have some questions I want to ask about so prepare yourself on the Sufi aspect of, because that seems to be in the United States. If people say Muslim or New Islam, there's sort of a little bit of fear. And the moment you mention Sufi, it gets pretty liquid. People are like more on the receiving end. So I'd like to know a little bit more about the Sufi aspect. And I just want to close today saying how grateful I am that we're having these conversations, and that we are hoping to open them up to other people joining in with us. So that's what I'd like to say.